my pleasure to be again with you. And this is a great series of conversation because we are among practitioners. You know, you don't come to go to the private sector and say generalities. They have your time is very valuable, and you want to make money, which is important for all of us to grow, and therefore you don't want to waste your time. So I think that what you're trying to do is to be very practical and concrete. We had set the scene in the previous meetings. You had a very good conversation about the importance of PPPs, trying to identify obstacles and what to do. And I think it's time just now to do things and to see practically how we can advance the agenda. So I will try to be as concrete as possible and to avoid any general statement and to try to make each other accountable and make sure that we leave this room and spend this hour and coming out of this by saying, okay, I know what Makhtar has to do, and I know next time when I meet him, what I will ask him. And I know also what I will be asking you next time when we meet, and we can monitor, make ourselves accountable for the good of our continent and for the development of our people. There is interesting. There is hope in Africa. There is the private sector is extremely buoyant now. There is a sense of dynamism that, as I said, when I came back working on the Africa region after many years in working on Latin America, I found a dynamism that I haven't seen for a long time from the private sector. And it was clear that when I met some young MBA student at one of the prestigious universities in the US, at the end of the meeting, I asked, how many of you are planning to go back home? And they all lifted their hand. None of them give me a CV to come and work for IFC and the World Bank. It would have been 15 years ago, I would have received a pile of CVs of MBAs from the top universities. Africans want to come and work for our institution. It shows that there is clearly trust in what is happening in our continent, and people are confident that they can take risks, make money, and this is a proposition which makes sense from an individual standpoint, but also collectively. And and they came with tremendous ideas. It was just amazing the creativity of these young MBA African students that I met during those sessions. So what is our role? Our role is to try to maybe help facilitating that process and creating a little bit of framework when you move to small is beautiful, to big is powerful. We've been often considering, in agriculture, that we should be doing small in Africa because it's good for our culture. We don't want to disturb the African culture and way of doing things the way we've been doing it 100 years ago. So that is the way Africa should be developing, by keeping things the way they were. And I'm not among those who believe that. I believe that culture, reality change with time, and what happened in the rest of the world in terms of transformation of the continent, transformation of our culture, transformation and adoption and influencing the rest of the world is the way we should be going. And that's what the private sector right now is doing in Africa. So I don't think that I will never be satisfied with this answer, oh, it's good for Africa. It's not good for Latin America or for another part of the world, but you Africans be happy with that. It's not the ambition that we have for our continent. So there is transformation is really at the heart of what we want to do today, and push for transformational project. We heard from the public side and the private side last time when we met during the spring meeting, and I'm happy to report that there is a lot of pickup on the PPPs. In 2012, we had a lot of PPPs, particularly in the energy sector. We had 22 PPPs in energy. Nigeria recently is also about to embark to a series of PPPs to help filling the gap in energy. So I think that very quickly, the private sector is taking the risk, and energy is where there is a lot of needs is become one of the areas where there's pick up. How we can expand it and extend it to other sectors and make sure that we're having the same pickup in agriculture, in agro-industry, in some light manufacturing or other activities is what I think is a challenge, and learn from what went well in some of the sector and try to replicate it. So I think this type of dialogue is important and useful because those of you who have been involved in PPPs in some countries can share their experience with other colleagues from other part of Africa and say what was the objective, what went well and how you can take some shortcuts. Let me tell you something which is not very usual to hear from a World Bank bureaucrat. I do think that there is a question that has been a bit of a taboo question, and has been discussed not openly. And I think that we reach a stage where we need to put it on the table, which is the role of the national private sector in the development of African economies. We cannot just talk about private sector development, PPPs, and ignore the fact that today is still largely dominated by non-African actors. And what we can do to bring more centrally in that proposition, in that debate. I know that we've been accused in the past often of being institutions we are favoring more foreign direct investment and cater less to national investors. And I'm listening very carefully to that, and I'm very sensitive to that. And one of the agendas that I would like to open now in our work as an institution is to see what is it in that, what can we do better to take the trader who was in Cocody, in Sandaga or other places, to start helping him moving more and more towards manufacturing sector, towards investing in productive sector, in more formal sector. What is a transition? What can we do better to help them transitioning to that and start bringing and creating that middle class in Africa that will be necessary to, in mass, to be able to partner with foreign direct investors and make a proposition of investing in Africa at a larger scale as being important. So I think that is a new area, and I think that we'll be really willing to work with you about your personal experience and what we could have done better, accompanying some of us and some of you who have been able to make that transition successfully and be able to invest in area as risky as some area in which we are. So there is some homework to do from our side, and I would like, with my colleagues here, Gev Tata, Paul Numba, and other colleagues, to start really now digging a little bit more in details about what are the institutional arrangements that will help. If I look at the PPP agenda, is still discussing with the different partners. Most of the projects are still coming from the public sector in Africa. The public sector prepares those PPP and go to the private sector. We have much less offer of PPP project coming from the private sector. I think, and one of the reasons that I'm hearing is that there is not enough either capacity at a large scale to allow a strong production of PPPs operation and project to be brought to the public sector, towards the public sector. So what can we do? One of the questions and one of the things, if that proposition is correct, one of the things and one that I would like us to discuss is how can we help private sector in Africa to build that capacity and generate much more projects which are bankable and to be presented to the public sector as PPP operation in the various sectors. The data says that well over 90% of the sponsors of PPPs are not African actors. So these need to be changed. It's not the case in Latin America, it's not the case in Asia, it's not the case in other parts of the world. So there is before us an important agenda of making things happen. What can we do to accelerate that process? We are, it's a trial and error process. What are we trying right now? I think one of the issues is the size of our market. We don't have a very large market if we take our country individually. It's clear that if you want to make money and bring large investors, it's important to expand the size of our market. So we are engaging more and more with the regional institution. We had a meeting in September with YMU and France and PPIF to try to start thinking about a roadmap to develop a common approach and capabilities on PPPs. Can we start having a kind of a regional framework, a regional legal framework which allow people to think about PPP not only for Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, Benin, but for the WAMU zone as a whole, and therefore make it much easier and reduce the transaction cost for investors to look country by country and try to learn about their respective legal framework. But also to foster the inter-Africa investors, to have much more African investors investing in other African countries and facilitate that process. From the World Bank point of view, we have some more work to do. One of the things that we would like to do to work on is to accelerate the execution and increase the success rate of key projects and PPPs by taking a bit more risk on our balance sheet. So this is a conversation that we are starting now with our financial complex, is how the balance sheet of the World Bank could take a bit more risk in supporting some of these PPP operation and kind of modernize a little bit our instrument. Secondly, increase the scope of instruments that we can offer. Portfolio financing in local currencies, swaps, this type of instruments that you are using every day, to see if we can also mirror them in our instrument to be able to match a little bit what you are doing. More guarantee, I hear that a lot. We did some PRGs, and there seems to be a lot of demand for PRGs. Right now, we are maxing the maximum of what you can offer for PRGs. So we have a conversation within the bank to see how we can better use our balance sheet to increase the level of PRGs so that you can support more PPPs. Last is to smooth the transition between IDA, which is our grant and low-income countries window, to IBRD, and try to make it a bit more for continuum. Right now, there is a bit of a Chinese wall. You are either IDA or you are IBRD. We limit the access of those resources to our countries. So one of the conversations that we would like to start is to see, can we use a little bit more of IBRD type of resources, which are slightly more expensive, to support projects which have a higher rate of return, particularly in infrastructure, and therefore increase and accelerate the possibility either through an increased size of PRGs or equity participation in some of the project. So that's what I wanted just to put as a concrete ideas on the table, and I wanted to also, by doing that, give confidence to institutional investors who start now accumulating a bit of money, such as, for instance, the Nigeria Pension Fund, which has a 20 billion in their coffer, which might be somehow, with the right condition, channels into productive projects, but they will not do it if they're not sure that there is a very high return and it's safe investment and which have the right guarantees. So if we start working on this issue, I think that will bring confidence to the institutional investors to start working in these areas. A bit long and passionate, but you know that I believe that this is the way forward, and this is definitely somewhere where we have a lot of homework to do at the World Bank, and I would like really to hear what you want to make us accountable, and if the few ideas that I put on the table make sense for you, or if I'm totally out of how do you say, after work.
All right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.